Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Umbrella Academy Season 4, Episode 5. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. The penultimate episode of the series. First and foremost, I'm going to start at the end and kind of work my way backwards. That whole Jean and Jean situation as we're continuing their interactions with Sai. And obviously, once again, I brought it up last episode. I was like, what is this dude's deal? Who are you? Like, you're playing all sides of it. Because I'm like, you're definitely not working with Reginald. You're definitely not working with the Keepers. Because he's also feigning ignorance of like, oh yeah, what happened to the girl? They're like, yeah, some tentacle guy showed up. It's like, he's like, oh, that's great. And it's like, oh, they're both two pieces of the same puzzle. He's the key. I think it's like, he's the lock, she's the key type of situation. So obviously he knows the truth about all this, but he's not letting the Keepers know. That's like I said, because of that, it made me think they were in cahoots. But they knew they didn't know they needed Ben last episode, not last episode, but like episode 3. They knew they needed Ben, but they knew they needed, Jennifer, they didn't know they needed Ben. And now they do know. But also what I brought up last episode too, you could tell Jean is not too happy about Sai, but J. Jean is. And so it's just kind of like that. Like I said, I figured he was gonna kind of come in between them type of situation, but not in the way I thought. I mean, it's a thing. I'm curious if the season was longer. There's certain ideas and elements here we've seen so far. This one in particular, I feel like this probably would have been expanded more, and it probably would have been more drawn out. But because you have to expedite stuff because your season is shorter, once again, I don't know if that's just a pure Netflix decision or whether the creators were kind of okay with that or just made the most of what they were given. I don't know. Either way, I knew things weren't over when Jean tried to like scare Sai away. I was like, that doesn't seem like that's going to stick. Because even then, it was the whole thing of whatever Sai's backstory is, it came back clean, and I was like, interesting. Because I figured that was all BS, but it makes sense that they would check it. That should have been a sign from the beginning that, wait, what's up? Like, he is actually a keeper? That wasn't just BS. Like, it was like, it didn't even cross my mind of where that was going to go. So later on when he shows up, I was like, oh, he's going to kill Jean and yada, yada, yada. Didn't expect the tentacle arm going through him. And I was like, okay. I was like, so is he the same species as Reginald? And then the face ripped off and it's his wife. I was like, that's a beautiful twist. It didn't even cross my mind, but it makes sense why his story is bullshit. Why his story, like, he is bullshit, but his backstory isn't, because there really is a Sai who was she's just wearing his skin, and it's like, interesting. That's so fascinating. Because we've never really gotten too nitty gritty about the details about how that whole situation works. I don't know if like Reginald's circumstances work like that, or is that just his wife's circumstances that works like that? Like maybe that's her special ability, just being able to kind of wear someone's skin and just adopt their memories. Because I'm like, this is our first inkling of that happening with her. So it flips a lot of stuff on its head, because it's like, right, Reginald's the asshole, but then you find out like, oh, you seem like his wife seems reasonable, but it seems like she's trying to bring about the end of the world. So it's like, maybe it's the thing of Reginald was so busy trying to save his wife, not recognizing his wife was pure evil type of thing. Like your Clint, like, not unless she's pulling a like, if I had to like compare it to anything, like not unless she's pulling like a Zod, where it's like, oh, let's terraform Earth and make it more like, you know, that's her thing of like, this is going to be the new beginning of our species. Because it's like, she even said it like last episode that the creation of those elements, like there was a, she made it, in retrospect, it sounds like there was a cleanse on their planet, and she was kind of the reason for that, and not unless she wants to make a repeat. You're like, what else would be your reason for wanting to wipe out humanity? And you're playing and manipulating your husband's children, and it's like, you like to say you're so two-faced. In fact, you're presenting yourself one way, and it turns out you're like manipulating a lot of stuff. Like Reginald has no idea he's getting played like this. That was like I said, I just think that was a beautiful reveal like that. I think that's so fascinating. Yeah, the question just becomes like, was she always like this and Reginald was just blind to it, or did something happen to her over time that made her like this? I mean, to be fair, we know like they've been living in this world for 6 years, so has she been planning this entire time? Because who knows how, because Reginald's had Jennifer like stashed away in that town for years. Once again, she came out of the squid when she was 6, and we saw that he was there during that news report. So it's like he's had her for all these years. So it's like this is a world where like him and his wife had already kind of had their time together. So they've technically always lived in this time frame. So it begs the question, you know, when did she start planning this? Maybe it's always been there, and our Reginald's just unaware because he stepped into this life with her and isn't the Reginald that she was. You know, she's the version of his wife from this new rebooted universe and not necessarily his wife. I don't know. I don't know if that's the angle they're pulling with that. I'm just so curious, like, what her motivation is. And now she's wearing G Jean as a suit, and J Jean is like, there's no way J Jean survives this season. Like, most likely, like, Reginald's wife is going to kill her. But it's like, yeah, now G Jean has access. Well, you know, Reginald's wife, disguised as G Jean, is able to have access to the Keeper's large resource, because they are like a large-scale organization with chapters all over the place. Because I was like, when that person reports Ben and Jennifer near the end of the episode, I was like, oh, that's got to be someone from Reginald's people. But it's like, no, it's someone from the Keepers. Because it's so interesting, because like earlier in the episode, Reginald gets contacted by one of his people that's out and about, and now the Keepers get contacted by someone they have out and about. So, and it's like, oh, let's put the call in. I'm assuming the call means for all members of the Keepers across all chapters together. I'm assuming that's the call. It's like, this is the end-all, be-all. Let's call everyone in. It's almost like the cult that's, let's drink the Kool-Aid at the same time. I think it's kind of supposed to be something similar to that, maybe. So we'll see. But there's a lot of other stuff to break down in this episode. Speaking of Ben and Jennifer, they're kind of making their road trip escape, and Ben's talking about, let's kind of like run away together. Has money stashed. He has crypto or something. He has a Cayman account. It's like, yeah, the feds didn't get everything, so it's like, right, we can start over. Our lives can be whatever we want them to be. You know, it's kind of like a little Bonnie and Clyde-esque element to it. I was like, are you also completely unaware of all the death and destruction you caused when you guys were like... I mean, it only showed them making out, but I'm sure they were banging it out. But it's like, yeah, like, that whole motel was like, parking lot was covered in... But you're probably like, oh, that was something weird. Or maybe it's kind of like the intoxication of their circumstances makes them blind, because they just up and left. I mean, like, the dude who runs the motel is literally dead in the front office. So it's like, you were just... I guess you had blinders on. You're just like, well, why pay? Let's just bounce. So maybe that's how that worked. Because I'm like, how did you not see all that? Did you just not care? You know, as Reginald puts it, he's like, basically, the longer Ben's around Jennifer, it seems like it's a two-way street, but they kind of made it more seem like it was on Ben. I guess because whatever it is, it starts in Jennifer, it's always been in her, and now it's spreading over and corrupting Ben, I guess is kind of the perspective on it. So... you still have Victor saying that he wants to try and speak to his brother and save him, despite Reginald being like, no, you can't do it. Like, this is kind of quite the gamble. He just believes it to be a lost cause, which I'm sure for Victor, that means a lot, hearing that, like, Reginald say that. Because, for one, it's like, that's always how their dad has always treated him. And also, I had brought it up before previously, like, Victor seemed like they were a lost cause in season 2, and Ben is the one that was able to drag him back. You know, so that's why I feel like that's why... I mean, Victor would feel like this if it was any other sibling, but I think in particular it's because Ben saved Victor in season 2 that Victor feels the need of like, no, I gotta return the favor to some extent. But once again, I think it would apply to any of their siblings under these circumstances. So, but Ben won't listen when Victor does call, especially because it's like, wait, you're with Dad? Really? Come on. I'm not gonna listen to you because for the first time in my life in so long, I mean, the past 6 years he's been living in this timeline, he's not been happy, and now he found some happiness. But it's like, is that happiness genuine? Is it just, you know? And it doesn't seem like it is. It is just kind of the intoxication of the what's drawing them together to each other. And we do see that, I guess, what's inside of Jennifer was always a ticking time bomb, and now Ben is lit the fuse, because we see at the end, it seems like it seemed like it was just bubbling beneath the surface, and she never really had to worry about it too much until now, where it feels like now it's like finally ticking down. And I guess now that it's activated, and even Reginald said like what happened at the motel was phase 1, and so I guess like you can almost look at it as like a bomb where all the chemicals are mixing. They've been mixing this entire time, and now like the nuclear fallout's kind of building up more and more inside of Jennifer until like I think like she goes nuclear in a lot of ways. I mean, that's probably not the apt description and metaphor and analogy to make, but that feels like what that's kind of happening there, considering like her condition's getting worse and worse by the end of the episode. So she might not make it at the end of this. Maybe they could still save Ben, but who knows if they'd be able to save Jennifer. She might be too far gone, sadly. What's being said about Ben might be true about her. But who knows? Maybe Ben can do something, or maybe in conjunction with all his siblings. Who knows? Because Victor and Reginald were on their way to continue after Ben and Jennifer when they get attacked by keepers. And Victor luckily protects them, and they're able to get out of there. But there's this nice moment kind of culminating everything for Reginald where he's like, right, this version of me, just thinking about the other version of myself, saying like, he should have never treated you the way he did. You've always deserved to wear the uniform. And obviously that means a lot for Victor, because once again, Victor's always felt like the outsider in his family. And that's why I also keep saying like Ben has kind of felt like the outsider amongst his family too. So it feels very poetic for him, for Victor to be the one to try and save Ben in this particular situation. Adds kind of another extra layer to that because of them both kind of feeling like outsiders. But for the first time, Victor's felt like the part of the family for a while now. But hearing that from their dad, it's like, right, it's not exactly dad, but it's still dad. But hearing him say like, right, that the other version of him was wrong to kind of treat me the way he did. I do deserve to wear the uniform. Phil finally kind of accepted, especially in their father's eye. And that's all any of them ever wanted, was acceptance from their father. Because his acceptance and praise was the closest thing they were ever going to get to love. Other than that, we had the whole situation with Luther and Diego at the CIA building. They go to, what was it, Section R or something like that. And Diego's kind of buying into all of this. He's like, yeah, these are the elite unit people. And then Luther seeing it for what it is. He's like, this is where basically agents get sent to retirement. It's just kind of like, I was thinking like, is that what Section R is supposed to be, like the rejects? And it seems like these were good agents at one point in time that just get relegated to this small like basement area. And Diego's kind of like, there's no way that's what this is. And he believes like, no, these are top-notch agents and stuff like that. And he ends up talking to Bud, and Bud gives him some interesting insight because he says, oh, cute family, my kids are about the same age. He's like, no, my kids are grown with their own kids. That picture's from decades ago. He's like the fact of the matter is, he's like, that's from my first marriage. I'm currently on my third divorce. And Diego's like, damn, dude. It's like, yeah. And so this life isn't all it's chalked up to be, because it's like, asking these questions, and Bud's like, yeah, like the missions and stuff, it was fine, but it like at the end of the day, I'd give it all away just to be with my family again, just to be able to come home at 6 p.m. and have dinner with them, to help my children with their homework. That Diego is so busy lamenting about like, because he had lived such an action life and now he had to settle down, and it's more of a, rather than being content with settling down, that even Lila had her trepidations about it. But it's like Diego had the biggest issue with their life, and that's probably what made Lila want to escape even more, where it's like, okay, you're bumming me out because you're saying, like, I'm not here in the marriage with you. You're not here either. Like, you're so busy thinking about, like, oh, what life could be if I wasn't bound by being a parent, yada, yada, yada. You groan and complain about the life that you had. And even though, like, from the very beginning, like, Luther even said, like, dude, and not just Luther, but even Five, the whole point of, you have what any one of us would be jealous to have. Like, don't screw that up. And Diego kind of did it. It's a twofold thing. Him and Lila both played their own part. Takes two to tango, as they say. And so it's the realization of, like, man, like, I've kind of taken this all for granted. And he tries to call up Lila, but she's with Five, which we'll get to later. So, yeah. I love the reveal, too. Like, I kind of had this inkling, like, something seems up with the CIA. And lo and behold, it turns out they're all, well, not all of them, but a good chunk of them, in particular Five's boss, turns out he is a member of the Keepers. So I was like, so now it makes sense why he probably tried to keep Five away from this case. So it's like, right, I want you as far away from this as possible. And maybe that's why he signed off and being 100% okay with distracting Luther and Diego, because you get to keep an eye on them and make sure they don't interfere. So it probably acted as kind of a twofold thing. I love Luther basically beating the shit out of them in the elevator. I think it's so interesting, too, and I feel so bad for Martin Roach. He's the actor who plays that CIA director dude, because it's like the third time I've seen him play kind of like an evilish cop. I won't say one of the things he's season 1 of Reacher. He was kind of a dirty cop. There's this, and then there's also, Lock and Key, but it's not like he got possessed. You know, so it's not the same thing, but it's just like that character became an evil version of the character when he got possessed in, I think that was season 3, wasn't it? Yeah, or I believe so. Yeah, so that's what I just thought was kind of interesting. I love that whole sequence of like Diego and Luther doing their thing, and like his suit gets torn away because it's a tearaway suit. Luther's walking around with his bare, hairy legs out. I always enjoy an action sequence where you get to just use the environment, you know. I also love they got some help from Bud, as well as the dude that was just randomly eating stuff at work. He ends up giving Luther the fork he stabs in that one dude's head. So I love that. So it's once again showcasing not everyone in that office building is evil and they're part of the Keepers, but it seems like a good chunk of them are. I mean, it makes sense why that section wouldn't be, because those, once again, they're kind of the rejects. They're kind of put out, they're the CIA agents that are put out the pasture, so it kind of makes sense that they wouldn't be in the know about all this. Hopefully this doesn't get them killed, but it might all be a moot point, because as head CIA dude says, I was like, right, you can't do anything to stop the cleanse, so they're running out of the building. So it's gonna be interesting to see where we pick up with Diego and Luther. Then there's the Allison of it all, which she found out where to go because Claire has shown up there to pick up, you know, Klaus during his, I guess, binges. So she busts down the door, goes looking for Klaus, runs into Quinn, and it's like because he hit her in the back of the head, it disorientated her, so her powers couldn't focus. Luckily, Claire showed up in time and distracted her. So I was like, I'm trying to remember, like, her powers didn't change last season, did they? Was it just the Mario Gold coming into their system this season that changed her power? Because she has, like, telekinesis now. It's not even just, like, the rumor ability anymore. I mean, she kind of, like, in episode 2, she didn't, like, she kind of rumored a guy, but it was, like, she didn't have to say anything. She just looked at him and mind-controlled him to kill everyone. So, but now it's pushing, like, she could just straight up do telekinesis. So, like I said, if the season was longer, we'd probably explore that a little bit more about, like, the new confangled powers everyone has. It seems like it's like modifications on the powers they already have. I mean, it makes sense because Lila hasn't really had an opportunity to really use her laser vision, because the last time she used it was episode 2. I guess no circumstances recently has really called for her to do it, but you get my point. Either way, when it's all said and done, and she's like, oh yeah, you called me a ball buster, right? And then she exploded his testicles. I was like, oh god, there's so much genital mutilation recently. It's like, Jesus Christ. If you've seen Gen V, you know what I'm talking about. It's like, Jesus Christ, there's so much genital mutilation. It's just like, I mean, they didn't go as far as Gen V did, thank God. But still, it's just like, oh, like his balls tearing open and just bleeding out. You're also kind of like, yeah, the bastard deserves it. He was talking, like, he attacked Allison, he did what he did to Klaus. It's like, he's a piece of shit, so... I just love her walking away with Claire being like, yeah, that guy was rude. I was like, yeah, you're doing all this. You ripped the dude's testicles open in front of your daughter. But it's like, it is what it is. We're going to go save Uncle Klaus, which I love that even under his circumstances, he's like, well, if I'm stuck in this situation, I might as well, like, make it a little better for myself. I can only assume, like, he was trying to get high, but he can't get access to the drug. So that sucked. Then he gets visited by Thunderbolt, which was like, that was actually really cute and adorable, getting licked by the ghost dog. And I was like, oh, that's sweet. I was like, the ghost dog isn't about to possess him, is he? But it does help that it's up, you know, above ground, eventually barking. And I love, you know, Costa's like, right, I'm going to get out of here. You know, it's like, you know, find your inner warrior. Find your Bruce Lee. Find your Uma Thurman. And, it's a conjunction of Claire and Allison finding him and him busting out. And we see at the end, Thunderbolt moves on. I don't know if that's like Thunderbolt has officially fully moved on, because like he does disappear. I was like, oh, probably like did a good deed. I was almost hoping Klaus was going to keep him, like be able to keep a ghost pup, but nope. So there's also that. And then finally, there's also the situation with Five and Lila. So when I saw the title of this episode ahead of time, and I assumed like, oh yeah, this would cut, like, I was like, maybe this ties into the 6-year time skip in between season 3 and 4. No, we have another 6-year time skip, because in that 6 going on 7 years, they never found their way back home. I was like, Jesus Christ, dude. I was like, that's interesting. That's insane. Oh, I was like, okay, that's, wow, I wasn't expecting that storyline to go that route. And I was kind of getting that weird feeling. I'm like, are they going to hook up? And they do. Which are like, oh, that's so weird, dude. Because that's like, I mean, they kind of joked about it a little bit in season 2, where it's like, well, Lila's technically their sibling, but it's like, none of them are blood related. I mean, because it's no different from like Luther having feelings for Allison, because it's just like, you grew up like siblings, and Lila never grew up with one of you, so it's not the same thing. But it's also kind of weird, because it's like, you do have some semblance of that to some extent if you were to focus on it, but then you've also got the element of, yeah, but that's also she's kind of like your sister, but also on top of that, she kind of is also even more like your sister, because she's your sister-in-law. It's like, it's all kinds of effed up. I mean, to be fair, her and Diego weren't in a good place. You're stuck together. And I think that's why, like, it hits. I mean, Lila and Five already kind of gel well together. I mean, their circumstances aren't like, they have close enough backgrounds that it's like, it makes sense. The organization you're a part of, you being assassins and everything, all that you've done, like, it makes a lot of sense why they bond like they did. What I also thought was interesting when you look at it, not only just from Lila's perspective of like, well, her marriage being where it is right now, and her life being where it is right now, let's not forget Five knows what it's like to be stuck when it comes to time. He knows what it's like to be stuck. And, well, he had, what was it, Dolores, his mannequin. It's nice to not be alone. Even that was like him probably like in his, you know, like, kind of out there state of being like, oh, I'm not alone. I have my wife / significant other, whatever the case may be. At least this time he legitimately wasn't alone. So going from timeline to timeline for 7 years, trying to mark off everywhere they go, every stop, trying to find their way back home. This episode also gave me clarity on something I had brought up earlier in the season, and I was like, we're never going to need to get clarity on that. It's the teaser at the end of season 3. And that could still be something that comes around in the series finale, but now I'm thinking at it like, is that supposed to imply like, no, that was meant to be like kind of like a wink and nod to, I don't know if they fully had the idea of what they were going to do with the whole train going to alternate timelines, but now I'm like, oh, that's what that it's not, because I was thinking that Ben that we saw at the end was also going to be in this particular timeline. It's like, no, he's from an alternate timeline, and obviously this is, once again, there's also the thing of, in between seasons, a lot could change. Because once again, I don't know how much this is pulling from the comics and how much it's veered away from the comics. And so this could be all new territory. This might not be anything from the comics at all. But I'm also wondering, like, well, we're talking about like this being decided to be the final season and it being shortened, that maybe some of that stuff was cut. Like maybe they completely rewrote what they had. Like maybe that setup was meant to be something else, but because this is the final season and it's shorter, they decided, okay, we're just going to have to like shift where we were going to take the story. That was open-ended enough that you're like, okay, that's a thread out there that, okay, what are you going to do with it? But you could easily say like, well, that was you peering into an alternate timeline, not this timeline saying that there are two bins here. It's like, you know, once again, still could come full circle in this series finale, and all this could be a moot point I'm making at this point in time because I have not seen the series finale yet. So either way, that's also something where I'm like, if this was a longer season, you probably would have had a whole episode fully dedicated to them bouncing from time to timeline. But it's like you got so many moving stories at one time. Like the episode, it kind of makes me think of, and funny enough, because of Nick Offerman, it kind of reminds me of episode 3 of The Last of Us season 1. It feels like this could have been that type of episode. That was immediately crossing my mind of like this kind of bottle episode in that capacity. The other thing it made me think of, that wasn't actually the first thing that came to mind. The first thing that came to mind was, it kind of reminded me of, if you've seen The Magicians, it's the Quentin and Elliot episode where they basically live their entire lives together. That's kind of what, that's the vibe I kind of got as well. So that's why I feel like if this was like a longer season, if they had the full 10 episodes, they probably would have dedicated, if not the entire episode, most of the episode to like that whole, like we would have probably gotten to see all the other timelines they went to, and you know, or maybe, I don't know, once again, original plans versus what we get, I don't know. This might have always been the plan when they were writing the season. I have no idea, right? So maybe it was always structured that way, or maybe they structured that way because they had such limited episodes. But either way, it's kind of like a, hey, we've been trying so hard. You kind of go from that stage of denial and craziness to you kind of are content. And 7, I mean, I don't know why I said 7, Jesus. 5, it's like, right, let's go back to that place with the gardens and everything and strawberries, and we can just stay there. Not forever, just kind of unwind, you know? Take a shower, and it's like, oh my God. What'd she say? She's like, I'll strangle something for, I don't think she said, did she say a kid or something? She said she strangles something to get like a hot tub or something, like a hot shower or hot bath. And it seemed like they built a little cozy life for themselves. It is interesting though, like if you notice, like the train did stop. So I was like, did they eventually learn how to make the train stop? I guess like maybe as long as the doors aren't closed, the train will never move. I guess that's how they pause it at a place from time to time or something. I guess that way you don't have to constantly sit around and wait for the train to come, because it's like, well, you never know, whatever danger you're dealing with topside could always fall you down into the station, so you probably want to be able to get on the move pretty quickly. But it's like, yeah, because they were just like chilling, like leaning against the train, but the doors were wide open because, like, you know, there's trash everywhere. So I'm assuming like as long as you keep the doors open, the train never, like, it stops moving. It's interesting too because like they're the only ones who have access to this platform. We haven't seen them with any other people here at this platform, so no one else has kind of been able to utilize this nexus of timelines. But yeah, like I said, it's just a complicated thing of 5 and Lila. Hey, you were stuck together. You've had each other's backs. You went through all this, you know, you trauma bonded over 7 years and kind of, you know, fell into each other because you never knew, like, right, will we ever find our way back home? And at one point, I mean, even like 5 giving her that brace, I'm like, how is this going to come to an end? Like, eventually it will, but how? And we see that 5 ultimately ends up discovering a journal. And he's like, oh, I wrote this. So I'm like, maybe some version of himself from the alternate timelines had sometime ended up, because he's like, oh, this is my note, this is my handwriting. So I'm like, it had to be a different version of him from a different timeline that wrote it. So maybe some version of him has gone through this rodeo before. Maybe it's kind of an Ouroboros thing going on, like your typical time travel thing. Or like I said, just a different version of him from a different timeline. A lot of possibilities on that front. And it turns out he didn't tell Lila for another 5 months because she's like, how long have you had it? He's like, 5 or so months. But it's like, yeah, now we're at the 7-year mark, whereas before we were at the 6 year, 5 months and 2 days mark initially before they decided to settle down. So they were there probably for another few months, like a month or two, and then you add in the extra 5 months to make it like a full 7 years. So it's like 5 is reluctant. He's like, right, like we built a life for ourselves. I mean, for one, we don't know what's changed because it's like if they do go back to their time, because it is the situation of like it's the same time and day, whatever timeline they went to. So it's like anytime they were in the train station and like time passed, like it's been 7 years for them ish, right? But it's like, has time moved like that everywhere else? Because we're seeing things present day in the timeline that we're in. So has time really moved like that? Or like, has it already been 7 years in the future and everything has kind of been wiped out? Like, will they go back? Well, because if they do go to that future, they could always like find a way to like blink back to present day. Always a possibility, but it's also like 5 doesn't know, like, right, who's to say we can actually trust this to like actually lead us back to the proper timeline in the first place. We could just be continuing over and over again, trying so hard for a place that we'll never get back to. And it's like, and we had this life here, and Lila enjoyed it and thought it was nice, but it's still the thing of my children are back home. This was kind of a nice escape, but I want my family. Just kind of like how Diego came to a lot of that realization this episode, so does she. So, and it's kind of, once again, it's sad because it's like, it was this nice moment, but it's like, yeah, how do you carry on knowing you had this, like, once again, it didn't turn into an affair until like year 6. They were just like friends. It doesn't seem like anything happened between them until like year 6 and maybe like year 6 and 7 months type of thing or something. I don't know. So how do you live with that? How do you deal with that? How do you just go back to your lives after this? Does 5 take his own advice that he gave to Diego? It's like, all right, you still like buried under concrete and just never let it surface. Like, does that come full circle? Once again, next episode's the series finale. So like I said, there's a lot of ideas that I'm curious like how much they had to rewrite and cut to fit the 6 episode thing. That's why I'm like, I'd assume that's a Netflix decision, and I don't know why they didn't get the full 10 episode order. And did they make do with what they had, or did they say like, no, we can get it in 6? Was that a creative decision on their part, or was that a Netflix decision? I don't know. You'd assume that's usually like a network decision, but I mean, it might have been a creative decision. So just certain elements here where you're like, oh, it's such a bummer because I would love to be able to explore some of these elements and things that sadly we probably won't get to explore. Probably might not get answers to some of this stuff in the finale because it might just be left open-ended, just because time travel doesn't always fully loop everything. It just depends on the series, so. But I'm still very, very excited to see where all of this takes us, where our family is currently, everyone's scattered, and how this all plays out, how this all comes to an end with the series finale. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.